So you bought a Glock because the world started ending and now you don't know what to do with it. You want to accessorize it, but you're not sure where to start or what's practical and what's not. Let's talk about that today. Before we get into this, I want to say thank you to everyone that likes, comments, subscribes on these videos. I want to say thank you to everyone that supports through Patreon, and specifically I want to say thank you to Aaron and Ron. You guys are the best. I really do appreciate the support that you guys have given me, and I hope that you continue to enjoy the content that I create. Now, while there is definitely something to be said about being able to pick a bone stock Glock off the shelf and take it home after you're doing your background check and your 10-day wait in the state of California, coming home and knowing that that gun's going to be dependable, that is definitely something to be said, but the Glock perfection is anything but. The gun comes in at around $500 and is an inexpensive way to get you a reliable, dependable, self-defense, personal protection range gun. And while there are many things that you can do to it, there are a few that I think are personally, in my recommendation, good, safe, practical options that aren't crazy, aren't going to be costing you an arm and a leg, and won't give you a gun that's unreliable. Because at the end of the day, if any of these parts that you start putting in the gun make it less reliable, chances are it's not going to be the gun that you would want for a personal or home protection kind of role. Today, I'm talking about my top 5 or my simple 5 recommendations that I make for people that are interested in upgrading their firearm, but don't really quite know what they want to do yet. These are very safe, very simple, very reliable options that aren't going to affect the form of the gun, but might make the user experience just a little bit better. Now, first and foremost, the standard sights that come on every Glock are these crappy plastic sights that they provide a fuzzy sight picture, they're prone to moving or breaking, and just are, in general, the weakest link of every single Glock. Now, when it comes to sights on a Glock, there are tons of options, but the two most prevalent types that you will see on the market are going to be either fiber optic, meaning that in the daytime, light shines in, providing light that captures in during the day, giving you a 3-dot sighting system that makes it very easy to see your sights. The other most common option would be a night sight setup. These night sights are very similar to the fiber optic. However, instead of daylight shining through them, they have a radioactive gas that is trapped in little vials in the front and rear sight, so that when the light is low and the light is dim, it gives you something to find in the dark. My personal recommendation, and that I like having on most firearms, is actually going to be this here, the TrueGlow TFX Pros. Now, what these are is a tritium and fiber optic. So like the tritium gas on the night sights and like the fiber optic during the day, they collect light through the fiber optic during the day, giving you the 3-dot sighting system that's very easy to see. During low light situations, the tritium vials in the rear of the sights actually glow through, providing you that same night sight and low light capability. It's really the best of both worlds. Some people complain about it being a cluttered sight picture, but if you're not doing competition 3-gun shooting, I truly think that the best do-it-all sights are the TrueGlow TFX Pros. I'll have a link to that down below. So where number 1 on the list was sights, and those cost about anywhere from $70 to $120 depending on the option you go with, the next options that I have are actually very cheap. The next 3 options can be had in total for less than about $30. So those options are, for a Gen 3 Glock, you can get a factory OEM extended magazine release, and what this is it gives a little bit of length to the magazine release, making it easier to press. So for me, even though I have very big hands, I mean, if you look at the size of my hand in relation to a Glock 19, my hand is pretty big. I have fairly long thumbs and fingers. I still find myself on a traditional Glock having to, occasionally, I would need to break my grip and shift it around. So I'm shooting, and I would have to come here in order to take the magazine out. With a slightly, and I'm talking very slightly extended magazine release, it gives me just enough length to actually take that out without having to actually break my grip in order to press that. That can be had for the low price of $5. The OEM Gen 3 extended mag release is the same one that you find standard on a Glock 34 and a Glock 35, but for the 19 and 17, you spend $5 on Brownells or wherever you choose to find it, and you can get an extended magazine release. The next part that I like on pretty much any firearm is, again, another factory OEM standard part. It is the extended slide stop or slide release. Now, people on the internet, the last time I talked about this in video, are going to complain that this is a slide stop, not a slide release. Listen, I don't care what your opinion on it is. Many people that know more about it than I do, many trainers and instructors are now shifting to using the slide release or the slide stop to drop the slide on a new magazine to load the gun. Do I recommend training both with the slingshot and the press of the slide release? Yes, train both, because while this is a gross motor skill to do that, you are not going to lose the motor skill functions required to press this button with your thumb, but then still have the fine motor skill functions to press the trigger or press the magazine release. So at the end of the day, I truly do not agree with the mindset of this is not something you're going to be able to hit in a self-defense situation. Having this extended slide stop and slide catch and slide release makes manipulating the gun easier, especially if you have shorter hands. Me personally, I again have big hands, but for people with smaller hands, you might not be able to reach this as well to lock the slide to the rear or to drop the slide. Regardless of whether you're using it to drop the slide or not, having it be extended makes it easier to lock it to the rear if need be. The next very inexpensive option is actually going to be a part of the trigger mechanism. So inside the trigger of the gun, there is a little slide piece in here that is called the trigger connector. And what this is basically a part of the trigger housing that when you reduce the tension that it imparts on the gun, it makes the trigger pull slightly lighter. Now, I'm not talking about making this gun a match trigger. The trigger weight after you install this $15 part is still going to be approximately 4.5 pounds. However, what it does is takes the overall trigger pull from about 6.5, that's typical on an OEM Glock, to about 4.5. And 4.5 is still very respectable for home defense firearms. Some companies out there that do instruction and do training for personal protection and home defense firearm training, they have certain trigger pull limits that they don't want you to go below. Many of them set that at about 3.5 to 4 pounds. This gun with the factory OEM minus connector will run you about 4.5 pound trigger pull. You don't have to worry about a gun that's just gonna go off because you accidentally touched it. It still requires manual effort and it does not change the trigger pull length, so you're still gonna be pressing and pulling that trigger to the rear. You don't gotta worry about the gun going off. It does not affect the safety of the gun. Again, that is an OEM part. And it being an OEM part means that Glock both uses it from the factory for the extended mag release, the extended slide stop, and the 3.5 pound minus connector. All three of those parts can be had for around $30 to $35 depending if they're on sale or not, and they're Glock parts, so you don't have to worry about, oh, is this aftermarket part going to work? Is this going to cause failures to feed? Is this going to cause reliability issues? No, because Glock trusts it and Glock tests it before they release a product like that. Now, if you really want to get fancy, and you absolutely must, and I mean you just cannot break it out of your head that you want to replace the trigger. The only trigger that I recommend for people to use, while there are hundreds out there are plenty of them out there. The one that I recommend is the Apex Tactical Kit, simply because these triggers are trusted by some law enforcement agencies and issued on their duty guns, as well as the fact that it uses mostly OEM parts. It basically just gives you a flat trigger face, meaning that you just press straight back. It's something that people really like. You can get it in a variety of colors. It doesn't truly affect your shooting ability. This is not going to make you a competition shooter just because you put an Apex kit in it. It's something that if you absolutely must, that's my recommendation. So we've talked about sights. Number one, sights. Number two, that is the mag release and slide stop. We've talked about the trigger connector, and if you must, an actual trigger kit. Now I want to talk about a light and a holster, and that's number 4 and number 5, and they are very related to each other. Weapon mounted lights. Many people are going to make the argument that you shouldn't have a weapon mounted light because you don't want to point your light at something that you cannot see what it is. So you hear bump in the night, you want to go figure out what that is. You would then have to shine the light on someone in order to identify them. However, having a weapon mounted light does not stop you from having a handheld, shining it on whatever it is that you don't know what it is, figuring out what it is. Then you see that it is a threat. You verify that that needs to shoot. You can then, with your firearm, with 2 hands on your gun, or with 1 hand, you can manipulate that gun. You now have a light that is attached to the gun that does not require you to use this other hand, but then gives you the ability to have 2 hands on the gun. A weapon-mounted light provides benefits that a handheld does not. A handheld provides benefits that a weapon-mounted light does not. Both are great. However, I personally believe that every defensive firearm should have a weapon-mounted light on it. If you can only choose to have one and you choose to go the route of a weapon-mounted light, something you want is enough light to where if you were to shine it in the sky, shine it on the ground, shine it at a wall, shine it up in the air, you can see how much light this is actually putting out in the room. This is enough to, in a home defense low light situation, I can simply press that light on, get enough spill in the room to see what's going on. You want a lot of weapon light. You want a lot of light. The mindset that many people have is that there is a certain lumen amount or a certain brightness that a flashlight can produce that is too much. I don't necessarily agree with that, because in a home defense situation, you know the layout of your house. You should not ever be shining a flashlight in your own home to search for something into a mirror, onto the white walls in a way that's going to blind you. You know the layout of your home. You should use that to your advantage and know where you can and where you can't shine a light. So I like to have as much weapon light as possible. There's a few recommendations that I have, but one that's, I think, the perfect balance of affordability and performance and reliability is the Streamlight TLR1 HL. This flashlight does stick out a little bit further from a Glock 19, but it's enough light to where I feel confident with my ability to identify something from a distance, but staying within a price range that's not $300 like a Surefire, but it's got more reliability than something like an Olight or an Inforce. Now, to touch back on what we said a moment ago, the flashlight and holster are very much recommended and are linked together. Let's talk about that. This holster right here is for a Glock firearm with an Inforce APLC. This Glock 34 with an Inforce APLC weapon mounted light on it works. This Glock 19 with a TLR1 HL does not work. Same thing goes with this. This is a Glock with a TLR1 with a holster that is designed for it. It works. However, if I try to put this other gun in it, it does not retain the firearm because the holster is built for the gun. There are many holsters out there that are multi-purpose or universal. Do not buy a nylon or a universal holster. Buy a holster that is designed for the firearm you plan on carrying and the light you plan on carrying it with. I don't care that you can get an Uncle Mike's holster for $12 that loosely fits the gun and has a button strap. Do not buy one of those. If you're looking for a real recommendation that isn't very expensive, you can get a Safariland or a Blade Tech holster made specifically for your gun and your light for around $40 to $60, depending on if you're willing to wait for a sale. There's many factors that go into what kind of holster, what kind of position that you would want, but the basic concept is inside the waistband is designed for concealment, outside the waistband is designed for open carry or for taking it to the range and just having a way to keep that gun on you. A holster is important regardless of whether you plan on actually carrying it, and here is why. So let's say that you have a gun that you want to be for personal protection or home defense. You don't have any kids in the home and you just want to have that gun laying on your nightstand or laying inside your nightstand. That's a good option. However, it doesn't provide any protection from accidentally, when you go to grab it, hitting that trigger, pulling it on accident. When I take my gun off at the end of the day, when I go to bed, I take this whole holster off my body and I set it down on top of my nightstand. So in the middle of the night, if I were to need this gun when it's sit down on top of the nightstand, I simply grab the gun out of the holster, or I grab the whole holster, put it on. So like, let's say I hear someone knocking at the door at night and I don't necessarily think anyone's actually there. I can put the holster on and have it on me. I don't need to necessarily have the gun in my hand. Then let's say I go to the door, I see that it's a person that I know, I can reholster that gun on my body and I'm concealed. It doesn't matter. Having a holster provides you options of concealment or keeping the gun on your person without having to have it physically in your hand. Whether you choose inside or outside, it gives you the ability to retain your firearm safely without having it in your hands, and that's huge. Now, if you have any questions, like I always say, feel free to drop a comment below. If you have recommendations, feel free to drop a comment on that as well. If you don't like any of the products that I've recommended, let me know. And as always, have fun, be safe, stay dangerous. Peace.